Hello everyone and welcome to the Creative Noah podcast. A really special episode for me to start 2025, as I get to shine a light on one of the most inspiring people in my life, my sister, Becky Weir. Becky is a counsellor with over 20 years experience working in mental health. She's the founder and co-director of the Midland Therapy Group, who aim to provide high quality, low cost counselling services to anybody who might need it. The team at the Midland Therapy Group also provides services and qualified support for trainee and newly qualified counsellors who are starting their journey in what is, let's be honest, a really tough profession. Becky and I talk about her journey into working in mental health, her goal of making counselling accessible and affordable to everyone through the Midland Therapy Group. But we also go into detail about the links between creativity and our mental health, NHS waiting lists, the key to effective counselling, and the current massive problem around men's mental health. But not only that, to add some more value, Becky also outlines 7 practical tips that all of us can use to improve our mental health on a day-to-day basis. Look, I've suffered at times with my own mental health, and we all go through stuff, and realistically, who can't relate to mental health in some form or another? And I really hope that this podcast can help in some way if you are struggling. But if you can only take one thing from this podcast, I want it to be that there are people out there who can and want to help. So please don't suffer alone. And with all that being said, let's get into it. It's a bit of a different one this time. An interesting and inspiring human being in my life is my sister, and she's kindly here and agreed to be the first podcast of 2025, which I think is going to be a good one because you are a mental health counsellor and have founded a company called the Midland Therapy Group, which aims to help lots of people with their mental health. So, it's January, people were starting the new year, lots of new goals, or they've maybe overindulged at Christmas and got some demons or whatever. But I wanted to get you on to talk about not only you, your career and the Midland Therapy Group, but also maybe give us some practical tips that people can use to improve their mental health in their everyday lives, especially moving forward into this new year. So, first of all, I reckon I'm going to, obviously, I've done you a nice introduction, but Becky, I'm going to ask you some questions that I don't think I've, as your brother, I've never asked you.
No, probably not.
So, what inspired you to pursue a career in mental health counselling?
It's an interesting question because I did hospitality management at college, uni, I guess, level. And the plan was to get onto Banks's graduate scheme and go from there. But because I did an HND and not a degree, I couldn't get on their graduate scheme because although I'd done all my practical stuff for Banks's, like assistant manager, placement and all of this, because it wasn't a degree, it was an HND, I couldn't get on the graduate scheme. So actually, if I'd had a degree in history, they'd have taken me.
How weird.
Yeah.
Okay. So that doesn't directly answer my question.
No, but I spent a lot of time working in pubs, doing assistant managers roles, and lots of local pubs. And in the time where you had people go into local pubs and stand at the bar and tell you their life story and talk to you about their problems.
Oh, I see.
And then I started to notice things like I'd get on a train to go somewhere, and I remember one woman sat down next to me and was telling me that she'd lost her husband and it was really hard. I'd given it no indication that I wanted to speak to her at all, but she just felt like she could sit down next to me and tell me all about how she was struggling and that she didn't see her friends anymore because they were all married and she wasn't. And I started to notice that a lot of people were doing that. A random guy with an upside down cross tattoo on his head was talking to me about being in a bail hostel, and And I thought, oh, okay, I've obviously got one of those faces that people want
I was
to.
going to say, were you walking around with a sign going,
It felt like it. Like, you'd have to check in the mirror to say you ain't got anything written on your forehead or something to say, talk to me.
okay, but was there a specific moment though that was the catalyst
Yeah.
to go, okay, I've noticed these things and I noticed that people...
Yeah, there was really, because I got a temporary job doing admin. And at that point, I had a relationship end with someone who was very difficult to be in a relationship with. Let's just say that. And things like that make you reevaluate your life and like what your plans were. And I was in a temporary admin job and I thought, oh, I don't want to do admin for the rest of my life. And I don't want to run a pub because that's a lifestyle, not a job. And I was like, what do I do? So I looked around, part-time courses, and there was a level 2 counselling skills course. And I thought, do you know what? People talk to me. I'll give that a go. It was one night a week.
How old were you at this point then? Because you'd done all the union stuff at Banks's, so that's...
I was trying to work it out the other day. I think I'd have been about 22, 23. But it was a weird, like usually academic years start in September.
Right.
But this course, this is why I think it was a bit of fate, destiny or whatever, because this course started in March.
What, just as you were looking?
Yeah, just as I was looking. And I contacted the college. They said, come in, have a chat to the course lead. So I went in, I think the next day, and she said, well, we usually have a waiting list for our counselling courses, but this one started last week. You've only missed the first week that's an introduction, and actually we've got a space on it. So if you want it, you can have it.
That does sound like fate.
So I skipped the waiting list. It was a random course that started in March instead of September. It all seemed to slot into place. And I think after the first week, I said, if I got hit by a bus now, I'd feel like I'd found what I wanted to do with the rest of my life.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That early on?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
And 20 years later...
Yeah. I mean, it's mad. Like when I think how young I was compared to everyone on the course, because it's a career change that people generally make later on in life. So I was...
Is that just because people generally feel like they've got more life experience?
I think so. And I also think that people fall into jobs or careers and don't really... It's a lot to ask a young person to pick what they want to do with the rest of their life. At the age of 13, when they're picking their GCSEs, they're moulding and shaping the direction they'll go. And loads of people don't get that right. So I think people get stuck in jobs because they have bills to pay and kids and families. And a lot of people come to it when they're older, when their kids have grown up and they have less financial responsibilities and things.
Do you feel like you were lucky then to find it earlier?
Yeah, definitely. Really lucky. Really lucky, because it's given me a chance to get so much experience doing different things.
And also going in it with a, at the time, younger person's mindset.
Yeah.
So did that make you feel slightly more relatable?
Actually, it's really hard, I think, because as a young person, I wasn't even in my mid-20s, and I'm thinking I could get there in a counselling room and people are going to look at me like adults older than me in their 40s or 50s going, well, what does she know?
Imposter syndrome.
Yeah. And it starts early, I think, with counselling, definitely. But I think when you're younger, I see it with a lot of the trainees when they're younger, they have the same thing. Oh, well, why would people think I've got any life experience? And actually...
That's a very human trait, actually.
Yeah. But the reality is I know, and I've worked with a lot of young people who have got massive amounts of life experience, more than a lot of adults have got. And so it's a judgment that we make based on it. Like, you should be wiser because you're older, not because of your experiences.
So you're a younger person studying counselling, and as I say, we're now 20 years down the line. What's that sort of progression like?
I think there's definitely more confidence. There's more... I think it's an experience thing as well, though, not just an age thing, but I think I trust my instincts more. I just go with my gut a lot more. There's still a bit of imposter syndrome because there is with everything. But I think, I have those moments when you're sat in a room with a client and you're like, I don't know what to do with this. And then I remember that actually I've been here before with clients and it always works out and it's fine and you find a way. And suddenly something will come to you and it will click.
But let's face it, now you've had 20 years experience. You started at 22. You've had over 20 years experience in the mental health.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's when I started sort of level 2 training. So there's been a progression. I then did 2 years of level 3 and that was my diploma and I was qualified. Now you have to train to a higher level to be qualified.
But you've continued
so I've continued
personal development in that sense.
Yeah, and I think the good thing is because I was younger, I went away and I did my master's in working with children and young people, and that was great because they related to me because I was younger, and so that really worked in my favour, and I think that really helped. I think if I'd been older, I wouldn't have taken that path.
Yeah.
So that was really great experience. And
should we list your qualifications, or
I don't know. I don't know whether they'd mean anything to anyone, but I mean, I started out doing a diploma in counselling, which is very generalised. Like I said, then it was a level 3. Now you have to have a minimum of level 4. There's a placement element to that. So you have to, while you're training, work with clients to pass that course. Then I went straight away and did my master's in counselling children and young people. So I'd just like to say, looking back to Bankses who wouldn't take me because I didn't have a degree, I went and got a master's without a degree. So you missed out.
Yeah, good for you.
Yeah.
And we should just clarify, Bankses is a brewery in the UK. Yeah. People might be hearing Bankses thinking, what, is she going to go and work for Banksy the artist or something? No, it's Bankses are a brewery based in the UK. So yeah, they're lost really.
Yeah, and you know, it's that judging people on a standard, isn't it? Or a tick box exercise.
I wanted to emphasise your qualifications because I can't help feeling in the world of social media that we're in, you can just seem to go and get some online diploma or something. I don't know what.
Yeah.
I see lots of people, whether it's I'm a life coach or I'm a counsellor, and I'm like, well, you weren't a counsellor 3 weeks ago. How did you get that?
It's a massive worry. So the industry isn't regulated. We're not classed as professionals in the same way as teachers or nurses or doctors or even police officers and social workers are. Our professional bodies are voluntary. We don't have to register with them. And although there's a disciplinary process if someone complains about you, it means nothing. Whereas with a nurse, if you go through a disciplinary process, you might get struck off and never be able to practice again. With us, that doesn't happen. You can be what they call sanctioned, but you can just change to a different professional body and no one would know. In actual fact, you can work without being a member of a professional body. So actually, when Groupon send you a voucher for a £25 counselling diploma, you can do that online course and say you're a counsellor.
Is that dangerous?
Massively. I mean, in the past few months, I've seen a couple of people for assessments who have gone to people who are saying they're qualified in certain things and they're just more damaged than they went in, more traumatised. And they've spent a lot of money paying these people to supposedly help them. And I talk to my supervisors about it because it frustrates me so much. We talk about it a lot in the office. It's really, really sad. And actually, to be fair to the professional bodies, they're trying to regulate counselling, but it then comes down to qualifications. So if you've got this qualification, you're at this level, and then this at that level. If you're accredited, you're at this level. And that's meaningless within the industry because experience counts for a lot and the type of work you do counts for a lot. What would be better is spending the money on a big advertising campaign explaining to people what they should be looking for in a counsellor. You know, asking them for their qualifications, asking them for their insurance, asking for their professional membership, asking them if they've got a DBS check, all those safety things. But clients don't know that. I think I've had one client in 20 years ask me my qualifications.
Really?
Yeah. And I've done over 4,000 hours of client work. And one person has asked me for my qualifications. I offer them when I first meet a client. If you want to see my qualifications with my insurance, my DBS check, they're all available for you. No, it's fine. And it's scary. It is scary. So,
because I'm sitting here a bit quiet because I think there must be some bad counsellors out there or people who haven't got the experience to deal with people. Where do you think that comes from? You mentioned something about, it's a career change that people do later on in life.
It can be quite often. I think also it attracts a lot of damaged people. And I know that sounds terrible, but my experience is that you come into counselling because you want to help people, and you come into counselling because maybe you've been helped by someone in your life, and that's great. Or maybe you haven't been helped and you want to stop other people from experiencing that by helping them in the way you haven't been. And that's great. And part of counselling training is that you have to go to personal therapy yourself. The problem is that a lot of people haven't dealt with their own issues before they come into training to be a counsellor. And often the personal therapy, when they're training, it's a tick box as part of the qualification in their minds, so they don't really engage with it. My thought process is, amazing, I'm being forced into therapy, because even for therapists, it's a hard thing to find time for, and money and whatever. So if someone's telling me I have to have therapy, brilliant, great, make the most of it. But it's on the list of things you have to do to get your qualification. So in my experience, a lot of students don't engage with it that well. A lot do. And some people go on a counselling course to get personal therapy, you know, from the role plays from the other people on the course, to talk to them about their problems, to try and work out what's going on for them by doing the training rather than going to personal therapy.
Oh, I see.
But I think that's often the same with psychology. Lots of people do psychology training because it's like, oh, well, then I'll know about my issue. I'll know about why I've got OCD or why I've got anxiety or what, you know. But knowing about it doesn't fix it.
Right.
It helps to understand something for a lot of people, but actually you still have to work with someone to get the coping strategies to fix it, or to really understand the root cause of it, or to process trauma. Or
I don't want to go into how social media has affected people's mental health, but along those lines of this idea that you can just get an advert on Groupon and be a counsellor, or do you think that's accelerated by the fact that just within culture, everyone seems to be using these psychological terms, but having most of the time little to no understanding? Oh, he was a narcissist, or he's this, or he's that, or do you know what I mean? These psychology buzzwords, and if you actually probably ask them, well, what's a narcissist? What are the 8 key characteristics of a narcissist as defined by the
DSM?
Yeah. No one would be able to know. It was just like, oh, he was self-centered and he broke up with me or something, or
I think,
vice versa.
Narcissism is definitely has been this year's on-trend thing. Like, I've been in a relationship with a narcissist, or they're a narcissist. Like, that is it's very unusual to actually come across someone who's actually a narcissist. Yes, people have narcissistic tendencies, but
we all do. That's our human brain is set up to keep us safe, so we're going to be selfish sometimes.
Yeah, and I remember at uni we did an exercise where we took the personality disorders at the time from the DSM, because they've changed since then.
Just what's the DSM? Sorry.
So it's the Diagnostic Statistical Manual,
right?
I think.
Yeah, I just thought we better clarify that.
So basically, what it is your Bible of how to diagnose something, which counsellors don't do. And that's for psychiatrists and psychologists and people in a sort of medical model. But the DSM gives you, like you say, the criteria of what would be a narcissistic personality disorder, what would be a paranoid personality disorder, et cetera, and every other mental health condition. And we did this exercise where we looked at all the traits of a personality disorder, and we had to decide which personality disorder was the one we most fit with.
Oh, God.
And it's really interesting because you can see traits of yourself in lots of them. And this is the problem. It's like any mental health condition, you can see traits of yourself in it.
But people put it under a blanket term of that person's a narcissist, or that person's a this, or that person's a that.
And I think actually, as a whole, all of those traits would make you a narcissist. But one or two of them, isn't that just how you make up a well-rounded personality with negative and positive traits?
Balance.
Yeah.
Anyway, we did digress a little bit there, but that's fine. So talk to me. You've got 20 years experience. I want you to tell me and the listeners about the Midland Therapy Group.
So, Midland Therapy Group came off the back of COVID, largely. It was a seed of an idea that had percolated in my brain from when I was training. When I was training, my dream was to run a counselling service where you could offer low-cost counselling. I didn't really have an idea how that would work. and run some training courses, CPD, that sort of thing. So that idea was like way back then. And see, I'd have jobs and be paid. So when I left my job and went fully self-employed and I was working by myself, it was great, but it's very isolated. And I had a network group that I used to go to that was really lovely. So that kept me less isolated. But then COVID came and the network group sort of fell apart because it was hard to do it on Zoom. And I wasn't coming into the office. And even clients at the start of COVID were like, oh, we'll just come back when it's over. Little did they know that it was going to last so long. But even then, seeing them on Zoom or talking to them on the phone, it just wasn't the same connection I was having. And obviously, COVID dragged out longer than anyone expected in the beginning. And people started to, I don't know whether people's mental health got worse or whether they had time to think about themselves. A lot of people weren't going to work. And what else do? You know, we don't have that time for self-reflection generally. And I think that was a lot of it. And relationship issues, like many people do not spend that much time with their partner or other family members. So as things eased off and I started to come back to work, I was getting a lot of inquiries for people, are you doing face-to-face? Which I was quite early on because we ended up with a mental health exemption. So, and luckily, big enough rooms that we could social distance and everything. So that was great. But a lot of inquiries about, oh, well, I can't really afford that. And I've always been on the cheaper end of the scale. And I was like, this is bad. Because there's counsellors out there charging £20, £30 more than I was. And I was like, they can't afford me, then they can't afford any help. So I got to thinking about how could I make counselling more affordable? And again, I think maybe fate was in play at this point because the 2 rooms next to my room suddenly became empty. And I was like, oh, okay. Because you can't run an organisation with more than one counsellor with one room. That's your office and your counselling room and everything else. So I was like, okay. So I started working on the figures and I started trying to work out how to do it. And the other thing that happened during COVID is that trainee counsellors on their placements all had to go online or telephone. So they had no connection with anyone on the placement. I've had trainees that I was supervising who literally just had a voice on the end of a phone from time to time. It was all done by email and they were getting inappropriate referrals and they just felt out there on a limb. And I thought, okay, I could do better than that. So the idea was because trainees, they don't have to do their placement for free, but the general rule is it's a work-based learning thing. You work for free while you're studying. So I was like, okay, so if I had some trainees who worked here, I could offer low-cost counselling and I would give them their supervision for free because that's a massive cost for them every month. So,
and can you just talk about, because obviously you've been in counselling that long that you've built up the experience and qualifications to be able to supervise trainee counsellors. Part of that, before you even started, you were supervising people as part of your practice.
Yeah. So one of the things a counsellor has to have is supervision from a more experienced counsellor. It's an overview of their cases. It's to talk through any sort of issues, problems. It's for them to reflect on how it's impacting them. And it's to make sure that everyone's safe, really. And so I was doing that for trainees and qualified counsellors working outside of, in their own private practice or in other organisations. So I already had, after I'd done my master's, I went and did a supervision qualification. And so I already had that. And I, in my previous job, had been supervising lots of counsellors as well. So I thought should be experienced enough at this point to manage this. So that's kind of where the idea of Midland Therapy Group was born, to create a social enterprise that would make counselling more accessible. There is still a charge to it because there's a cost. There's room cost, there's heat, there's light, there is supervision for the trainees. But clients can pay £15 and see a counsellor.
And can we just clarify, I mean, the NHS is in a bit of a tricky situation at the moment, isn't it? And what are the sort of waiting lists like if people were wanting to get referred from their doctors? Because I guess a lot of people would, I can't afford private counselling. I'm going to have to wait for my doctor to refer me. The doctor turns around and says, oh, that might be
Well,
however many months, and what's happening to that person's mental health in that time?
yeah, I mean, it's really difficult, isn't it? We are anecdotally hearing from clients who've been referred to the NHS that it's anything between 12 months and 2 years.
Really?
Yeah.
And what's a person's mental health if they've got to the point where they're brave enough to go to the doctor and say, I'm suffering?
Yeah.
And then we go, okay, well, you've got to wait 12 months before you can. And then what is it? What, 5 to 6 counselling sessions that you might get?
Yeah, maybe 6 to 8 if you're lucky.
6 to 8
6 to
counselling
8
sessions
if you're
on the
lucky.
NHS
Yeah.
that you've got to wait a year for.
Yeah.
I know there's a stigma around it, and I know there's this idea, but surely for the sake of £15 to be able to sit down with someone after an assessment, admittedly, and all those things, but
Yeah, I mean, to see a counsellor here, you'd wait a matter of weeks, and largely that's because you have to come in for an assessment and then there'd be a process to allocate you to an appropriate counsellor. So that just takes time in terms of the admin of it. Sometimes it takes a little bit longer. I mean, we did have a waiting list that was about 6 weeks at one point, but that's about availability. You know, lots of people want evening appointments. And we only have a limited space for evening appointments and a limited number of counsellors. So sometimes that's the reason that you would wait a bit longer. But, you know, compared to 12 months to 2 years.
And we've jumped a bit ahead. So obviously that's now. You've got these, you know, you at the point you're looking into these 3 rooms and going, right, this can be something.
Yeah. Yeah. So I worked out all the costings. Could I afford it on my own if I found no trainees? You know, could I afford the extra cost? I am one for going over things and to the nth degree to make sure that things are going to work. And I started contacting training providers and saying, how would I get on your list of approved placements? And they were really helpful, really, really helpful. I had a couple of Zoom meetings with people because they were interested. It's hard for people to find placements. It's massively competitive. So I spent time laying all the groundwork, and while I was waiting for the rooms to be redecorated and carpeted and stuff. And then I suddenly had these rooms, and I was lucky enough to apply for a grant from the local council, which price matched some of the stuff I had to buy because obviously you need furniture. And so then I had to find trainees, which wasn't that hard because, like I say, it's very competitive. And I started off with 3, and then that quickly went up to 5, which sounds with 2 rooms like a lot, but they're doing different days and evenings because, you know, they can only do see so many clients a week, and most people are training part-time and they have a job and other commitments in their life. So that worked out quite well, and managed to luckily get involved with talking to the social prescribing team. So social prescribing I think it's funded by the NHS, but often contracted out. Sometimes it's internal, it depends on the area. But what social prescribers do, they're based in GP surgery, and if someone comes in and it's mental health or weight issues or different things like that, they might see a social prescriber, and the social prescriber will signpost them to things in their community that can help them. So rather than prescribing meds, it's prescribing to you things that will help you with your mental health or your physical health that you could go and do. And so we made contact with them, and they were great because I had a meeting with their whole team, talked about the service, and then they were pushing it to people within GP surgeries rather than them going on a waiting list. So that really helped us.
And then when did it escalate from being you with the trainees to having
Everyone else?
Well, can you just tell us a bit about like the organisation as it stands right now?
Yeah. So we have different tiers, levels of counts. It was to create a different level of fee that you pay. So we have our trainees, and then when a counsellor qualifies, a lot of them, not all of them, but a lot of them have to do a certificate of proficiency to become a registered member of their professional body. So what we said was, while they're gaining extra experience in the first year, we'll class them as newly qualified counsellors. It'll give them a year to get their certificate of proficiency, and we will charge a bit more to clients for that, but still not a full price. And we'll be able to pay those counsellors some money for the work they do. So it also gives them a year to look for a job, decide if they want to specialise in anything, if there's, a career move they want. It's a bit of wiggle room where they're earning a bit of money. They don't necessarily have to pack in their main job that they'd been doing when they were training. And then after that, we have qualified counsellors. So that's then your next sort of level up. So they earn a bit more money, the clients pay a bit more money, and it's after that first year or ongoing after that. And a lot of those counsellors have a specialism. You know, we've got a couple of counsellors who've got specialist autism and ADHD training, different people who've got sort of trauma and sexual violence training. So it's that. And then you've got the accredited. So accreditation is something that you sort of apply for through your professional body. And it's just proving that you've met a standard, that you've done so many client hours, that you've met a standard, that you know your theory, that you're having supervision. So that's sort of our next level up. There is currently 2 of us at that level at the minute. And both of us really did our accreditation to do some further training to work with trauma in a more specialist way. So, yeah, so that's kind of our structure. So you have your trainees, you're newly qualified, you're qualified and you're accredited.
Yeah.
And then we do offer some specialist things. So EMDR, which is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, which is a specialist trauma approach, and couples counselling. So you'd pay a bit more for those because they require extra specialist training on top.
And in that structure, in the assessment process, when new clients come in, presumably their level of whatever they're going through is based.
So the assessment is always done by an experienced counsellor, and the idea of the assessment is to find out what's going on for the client, what they're looking for, because we want to be able to meet their needs. Lots of people come in and say, well, I can only afford to see a trainee, but actually what they're dealing with is too much for a trainee. And we have to say that, you know, that's not safe to see a trainee. You need to see an experienced counsellor. We understand, like, the cost thing is a factor, but it's also to best match that client with the right counsellor for them. So not just experience-wise, but there's a gut instinct of, they'd connect with that person. And relationship is the key to counselling. Like that trusting, safe, non-judgmental relationship with your counsellor is the key to effective counselling. It doesn't matter what modality theory that you work from. The research says relationship is the foundation of successful work. So for us, part of that assessment is to make sure that person, that you can try and get that person with someone that they are going to feel that connection with to enable them to work successfully.
And how do you approach that sort of, well, I suppose you sort of bypass a little bit, because I suppose once people have contacted you, they're already open to the idea of counselling. But presumably there is still a bit of resistance and stigma around counselling. Maybe I'm talking more from myself. I look at the mental health statistics and suicide statistics around men.
Yeah.
And maybe that's something we can talk about, because you've got male counsellors, you've got female counsellors.
Yeah, it's really difficult because actually I would say our client base is probably 50-50-ish, male to female. And I think I've seen a lot more men coming through the service prior to COVID, but like it's becoming more acceptable. But the statistics for male mental health are problematic.
Scary, I'd say.
I think scary. I think there's some great things out there for men that are less mental health, things like the Men Walking and Talking groups and Andy Mann's Club and things like that are less about, you know, less, I suppose, stigmatised than counselling maybe.
Yeah, it's the things like that Australian thing where stick 2 guys in a shed, they'd rather fix a lawnmower and bash out their problems together rather than sitting in front of someone and going, this is what's wrong with me.
So there is more of that going on, which is great, but the statistics are still not great. And I think it is often because men are not supposed to have feelings, are they? They're not supposed to have emotions. They're supposed to be strong. They're supposed to...
No, we're just supposed to suck it up.
And get on with it and... just hit someone instead, or do you know what I mean?
Or worse.
Yeah, or worse. And
suffer
I think
from terrible thing like suicide.
Yeah, and I think that's still pretty prevalent, really, in society, and that's really sad. I think men often want to speak to women, which is interesting. I understand why, but that's what we get when we see male clients. we ask clients if they would prefer a male or female counsellor for a number of reasons. Things like men would often rather speak to women, but also when you work with a lot of people who've experienced sexual violence, often sexual violence is perpetrated by men and they don't want to then sit in a room with a male counsellor. So, we ask that for safety reasons for the client, really. But that's what you will find is a lot of men will say, no, I don't want to see a male counsellor. So, yeah, I think I don't know what we can do other than, again, it's about making mental health okay, making it okay for men to talk about their feelings, and giving them a language, I think, is often the problem, because men are not, they don't, like, you talk to them about and they don't know what that feeling is.
Yeah, I understand that.
So it's like educating someone on, like, well, could that be sadness? Could that be joy? Could that be anger? Could that be anxiety? And emotions are hard. Like, you could feel anxious, but then you might lash out at someone because you can't express that anxiety because that makes you feel vulnerable. So instead you get angry. Do you know what I mean? So actually, what's the real emotion? It's not really anger, is it? It's really anxiety. So it's about unpicking things like that and understanding.
Yeah, and I think, I don't know what the answer is, as I say, but the numbers are so scary. And it does feel like a little bit, it's like, people talk a little bit about men's mental health and it feels a bit more accepted now, but the numbers don't reflect it, clearly.
No, but I think it takes time. And I think we talk about men's mental health and we talk about male suicide and things like that. It's very different to compare, isn't it, in terms of men and women, because actually what you will find is that women make up the majority of people who use services like rape crisis services for counselling and stuff. That probably wouldn't be classed as mental health in the same way because they've had something happen to them and they're getting help for that. Do you know what I mean? So the figures are so skewed in so many ways, as with everything, I guess. Whoever's collecting that information wants to show what they want to show, don't they? I think we, as a society, actually, no, it's men. Men need to encourage other men to talk. Men need to encourage other men to go to therapy if they need it. There needs to be less of that bravado and more of that.
Agreed.
It's all right. And
agreed. And you see people like, there's UFC fighters like Paddy the Baddy, they come out and they'll after, when they win a fight, he's lost friends to suicide and stuff, and he'll come out and say it on the biggest platform and say, look, I'd rather you crying on my shoulder than you not be there tomorrow.
Yeah.
So.
But the problem is women telling men that it's okay to have feelings falls on deaf ears, because men go, yeah, but women talk about their emotions all the time. That's just normal. It's normal for you. It's other men have to say to men.
And also, I was like, this is going down a slightly different route, but I think there is some sort of stigma around, a woman wants you to be vulnerable with them, but to a point. I think they still want you to, I'm going to sound like a dinosaur, they still want you to, if you're not the provider and protector and you're there crying on their shoulder every night because you've had a bad day at work, it's...
Yeah, and I think, actually, yes, I think relationships or whatever should be supportive, but actually you shouldn't try and be each other's counsellors. That's for professionals, because you skew the relationship, you become a carer, and relationships should be more equal than that. So actually it's unhealthy on so many levels. Yeah. Even though, I think we are ingrained to a degree, aren't we? Like, I mean, Disney princesses are rescued by their knight in shining armour. That's what society has told us continuously. So there is an element of that unconsciously in people's brains and that's part of the problem, isn't it? It's like you have to acknowledge that unconscious feeling or idea that you have about being rescued or looked after, even though it's not necessarily what you genuinely think. It's still a seed in the back of your mind. But I guess what I'm saying is when women are encouraging their partners or their brothers or their dads or whatever to go to therapy, it's just like, oh yeah, that's for women though. You're just saying that because you're a woman. Whereas if a man was encouraging them to go to therapy... Yeah,
if your best mate in the gym said, bro, I think you're struggling, I think you need to talk to someone, you'd probably pay much more attention.
Yeah, or like, I've been to therapy. It really helped me.
Yeah.
That's why I say it's got to be men, because men hearing mental health advice from other men about what they can do, or that therapy is not scary or whatever, that's what changes things.
Yeah. I feel like we've diverted a bit there. But back to the Midland Therapy Group. So the Midland Therapy Group, I don't want to say the elevator pitch, but is that the overall goal, to provide high quality, affordable counselling across all levels?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is the ultimate goal, I guess. Also, though, the other aspect is it's not just about people's mental health. It's about counselling it's about counsellors. It's about trainees having a good experience, because so many trainees have a bad experience, like in COVID, where they didn't have contact with anyone, or, it's to prepare trainees for the real world in a proper, safe way.
And like you say, help prepare them under the experience and tutelage of other experienced counsellors, rather than, I've done a Groupon voucher that said I'm a counsellor.
Yeah.
Which will have the knock-on effect. Therefore, you'll have much better counsellors in the marketplace. In the marketplace, that sounds very...
Yeah, but I suppose it is.
But in the ether, for people to take selection from.
Yeah, and also it's about them having access to a network, to not be... Counselling is a really isolating job, even if you're in an organisation, because ultimately it's you and someone else in a room. Only you two know what's going on in that room. And even with supervision or whatever, you can only explain or convey so much of that experience. And sometimes often it's really nice to just walk into the office and go, that was a hard session. You have to say why, but everyone gets it, so it's that community. It's an opportunity for all counsellors, qualified trainees, to have that support network, to have that banter in a WhatsApp group at the end of the day, or when it's Friday, we get a message saying, thank God it's Friday, kind of thing, with a little minion cartoon or something.
Yeah, some sort of gift.
It's just that contact, that knowing someone's there. So it was about creating community for counsellors. And presumably
that makes you all better counsellors.
Yeah, and, it's part of that self-care, but it is, isn't it? You're not alone. You've got someone to talk to. There's someone at the end of the phone or in the WhatsApp group, or you can send a long-winded email about what you're worried about. It's a safety net, and it's good to have. And I think that was the other thing for me, was I was seeing all these bad counsellors, and it was like, well, if I can have an impact, it was me then, but now us as an organisation can have an impact on these new counsellors coming through and how they are, and what we expect of them means that that's what they'll expect of themselves when they go out into the world, whether it be private practice or a job. They will have a standard, and that's good.
Yeah, and like you said, that's so important, because how many bad counsellors are doing more damage than, actual good.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about creativity. Yeah. How do you think creativity and mental health are connected?
I think they're connected in loads of ways. Obviously, there's the obvious things like art, psychotherapy, play therapy, all those sorts of things. But equally, for us, it's a massive tool for clients, to express themselves. I've got a client who writes poetry. There's a few clients who've written poetry and brought that in as a way to explain their mental health, because they can't say it. But then you have that other aspect, don't you, of creativity and mental health. What's the impact on someone's creativity? So, for example, a client that I've worked with recently writes poetry, but his mental health is really bad, and poetry helps him with his mental health, but he got to a point where he couldn't write poetry because his mental health was so bad.
Oh, right, okay.
So then he's like, what do I do? How do I get these feelings out of me? So for me, a gauge, not that was coming into the room, but a gauge of his well-being was when he came in the one day and went, I've started writing poetry again.
Right.
Because mental health can be a block to creativity, can't it?
Definitely.
Massively. But then some people are only creative when they're in a really bad place.
Yep, I get that.
Because you create something out of the sadness, the misery, the anger, or whatever. And then when you're happy, it's like, I have no creativity.
Yeah.
I think there's definitely a link between mental health and creativity, sometimes in a good way, sometimes in a bad way.
I'm going to say something really random, and I'm going to caveat. I don't think anyone is more important than any other person, or anyone has deeper or darker feelings than anyone. But do you think people who quote unquote consider themselves more creative have more of a propensity? Just because I think sometimes, like, if you're more creative, are you going to create more creative, darker situations in your mind?
Potentially. I think there's definitely a potential for that. And I think maybe creative people are more in touch with their emotions, more connected to that. Because I don't think people who create just have an idea and make something, paint something, sculpt something without putting part of themselves into it.
Yeah.
Like,
agreed.
I just don't think that's a thing. So you've got to have a feeling about what you're creating, haven't you?
Mm.
To create it with a passion or to care about it. And that is so different to most other jobs, isn't it? You don't have to have a feeling to go and work in the checkout of Tesco's or be an accountant. And you know what I mean? You don't have to have a passion it's nice if you do, but to create real art that you love, because I think as an artist, you have to love what you're doing. You have to put some of yourself into it. So there's no way to disconnect.
And there's people, we've spoken about it in the past. It's like, Sylvia Plath said she couldn't write
when she was happy.
Yeah. Going back to what you said, you found with clients that some clients can use it in poetry. Have you ever had any clients use it more visually, not writing as such, to express their emotions?
Lots of clients draw outside of counselling. I have had clients who will go, "Have you got some paper? Let me," but I wouldn't say it was in an artistic way. It's in a way to kind of describe their feelings to you, or to almost map out, draw out like where they are and how they fit with other people. We use lots of creative stuff. I mean, we've got sand trays in the room, so you can do a bit of sand art, or you can just play.
And is that that's not just for the children? That's just for adults as well, if you wanted to.
Yeah, I mean, I use a sand tray with a client for grounding, so she puts her feet in it.
Oh wow!
Like bare feet.
Okay.
So it's like being connected with the ground and keeps her grounded. So but that's like a creative idea, isn't it? That within counselling, it's not structured. You have to. We've got little stones and crystals and things for people to touch and hold, and pens and paper and fidget toys. And it's about connecting with your client and going, actually, I'm wondering if this would really help you in the room. Would getting a piece of paper out and drawing that, putting it down on paper help you? Yes, it would. It's
that thing about what I speak about a lot, that creativity isn't just drawing, painting, writing. It's problem solving.
Yeah.
And that's what you guys are doing. You might find, they're really anxious with their hands while they're talking to me. Let's give them something tactile to play with or touch or something like that.
And, even to like little nesting dolls that you take them out and you're like, you can use that as a metaphor for like you as a person and the different layers, or use them as like different parts of your family. And, you just, possibilities are endless.
Yeah.
I think what we do is we have to think on our feet with the client. You get to know the client and then you get an instinct for, actually, this would be something that would work with them. Like, you could get nesting dolls out with someone and they're just going to look at you like you're completely insane.
Right.
But another client might really connect with it, and you've got to make that connection, understand the client enough to know what's going to work for them, or not to offer them something that they're going to think, absolutely not.
Yeah. I think that leads us nicely on. We've spoken about a lot there. The one thing I do want to ask is, how do you balance because obviously you hear people's problems, issues day after day. How do you balance that emotional demand of what you do as a job with your own mental well-being? Or is that going to lead us nicely onto some of the tips and practical things?
I think for me, I always say this, I'm just really cold-hearted, which isn't true at all.
No, not at all.
It's leaving stuff in the room, sort of, kind of visualization of like, I'm just going to leave that and shut the door on it, the same as a client would when they leave. It's feeling your emotions, not with the client, obviously, because you're there for them, they're not there to support you, But like, you know, if you come out of a session and it has upset you, have a bit of a cry or, you know, but mostly it's about doing things in your life that are outside of this. So like I'm part of a drama group and that is hard work, but really fun. And so I have other things to look forward to, you know, it's like, and I love drama group because it's completely different. There's no other counsellors there. I'm surrounded by counsellors day in, day out. These are like people who've got completely different jobs who don't work in mental health. So don't want to talk to me about that stuff.
Yeah. Do you find that's a problem sometimes when you're all in the office together, all you talk about is...
Yeah, massively. We talk about work, we talk about clients, but equally that is good because we need that as well. And there is a bit of a dark sense of humour that goes along with it. I think it's part of the territory of working in mental health that you have to have a bit of a dark sense of humour to get past some of the horrible things that you hear.
Yeah. Does that lead us nicely on to maybe what people have actually been hanging around to see how people can actually get some practical steps or practical tips that people can use to start to improve their mental health as we move forward in this brand new year? You've got your list of top tips, haven't you? You and the guys at Midland Therapy Group have come with
Yeah, I mean, I had a list of 15. There was some overlap, so we're not going to do 15. But I spoke to everyone here and they gave me what they do to help them.
Great.
And realistically, just as the caveat, this doesn't work for everyone.
No. And I suppose we should also caveat, if you are really feeling it, get in touch with a professional or
ask for help.
We can leave some numbers or some details
Yeah,
attached
we've got
to the podcast of numbers of places people can get to. If they are hearing this and they're feeling it, we don't want anyone to, you know, think this is going to be a all-seeing problem solver.
Yeah, these are day-to-day things that they're not going to fix your mental health, but they're going to make you feel a bit better that you can do.
Yeah, perfect.
So.
And how many have we got, do you reckon?
I think there's 7.
Top 7 practical tips.
Yeah, so...
Should we go through them one by one?
We can do.
Let's do it.
So we've got a walk in nature.
Nature, perfect. Fresh air, nature. Are we putting a caveat, turn the phone off while you're out there, or I suppose you need phone for safety?
Don't go without a phone just in case.
Yeah.
But maybe turn it off, put it on airplane mode, silent, whatever works for you.
Nature's always a good one, isn't it, for just calming.
Yeah. And just watch that. You know, we see things and we want to take photos of it, but just actually see things.
Yeah, enjoy it. Just enjoy it with your mind, enjoy the memory.
Yeah, because...
Don't need a picture of every nice sunset or whatever. Actually, it's probably better left in your brain sometimes.
Little and often.
Is this number 2?
Little and often.
What do you mean by that, little and often?
It's kind of like, don't push yourself to do big lists of goals. Just do something small. Oh,
I see. Okay, yeah. So yeah, it's the be incrementally 1% better every day rather than thinking you're going to change your world in a...
Yeah, so I mean, often like, you know, with young people, they can't tidy their room. And it's like, okay, well, every time you go into your room, just put one thing away. That's your goal. Just put one thing away.
Mm.
And that's it, little and often, isn't it?
Little steps mount up to a big distance.
Yeah.
I get that. And that applies across all goals. And,
yeah, definitely.
And even not so bigger goals, like you say, like cleaning your room and those annoying tasks you've got to get done.
Because if you do one thing, that's more than more than nothing, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
And having worked with a lot of teenagers around their exam stress, we talk about this because they're like, you know, schools tell you to do a revision timetable and this, that and the other. And I'm like, just do 5 minutes while you're boiling the kettle for a cup of tea. And they're like, what? I said, just do 5 minutes just read something for 5 minutes while you're boiling the kettle.
Does that come back down to the sense of like mentally going, I've done something rather than nothing?
And often once you've started reading something, you've forgotten the kettle's boiled and half an hour later you're like, oh, I was making a cup of tea.
Okay.
You know, but actually 5 minutes, instead of them going, oh, you need to do half an hour at a time or an hour at a time or whatever, 5 minutes is doable because you put the kettle on and you can just read something and then it shifts the mindset because it's like, okay, I've done something.
Yeah, prime example. I know this is going to be so off topic, but me with my learning Spanish, I do 5 or 10 minutes on my apps every day and go, at least I've done something. I'm not speaking full-blown Spanish, but yeah.
And that's it, little and often.
Little and often, I like that, yeah. Number 3?
Sleep. Respect the clock, turn off devices and go to bed.
Say that again?
Respect the clock, turn off devices and go to bed.
Okay, yeah, definitely. all of us underestimate the importance of sleep.
Yeah.
Especially like I do it all the time, where I think I'm just going to grind, I'm going to work, and I'm going to get this done. And then I end up probably making more mistakes. I'm working till 1 o'clock in the morning than if I'd just gone to bed at 10 o'clock
and got
woke up in the morning and done an hour.
Yeah, but we do it with other things. It's not just work, is it? It's like, just one more episode.
Yeah.
One more episode.
Yeah.
And then I'll go to bed. And it's like, no, you are capable of just going, actually, it's 10 o'clock or it's 10:30. I'm going to bed.
But they're designed like that. Netflix designed it so, and he gives you like 5 seconds or something. It's not even enough time for your brain to go, maybe I should go to, the opening credits started.
Out,
yeah, I get it.
Yeah.
Number 4,
do something that calms your mind. So whether that be, for some people it's meditation. I can't do meditation. I'm much more of a, and lots of people are into that mindfulness and stuff like that. For me, mindfulness is being completely in the moment. And that calms my mind. So if I'm out with the dog, it's like actually taking in my surroundings and breathing in the air and feeling how cold it is. And that's mindfulness. Being totally in the moment is mindfulness. And I think people get scared of calming their mind in that way because they think it's about meditating or deep breathing or, that you can get wrong, I guess, is what people think, or that doesn't work for them. For me, it's like, buy a bar of chocolate and just focus on eating that bar of chocolate and everything about it. That's being mindful. That's being completely in the moment. Like
present feeling of.
Yeah. And that can calm your mind.
Well, I was going to say in terms, I'm thinking it from my creative brain. I think like a flow state. When I used to DJ, all I used to be able to think about is the beats. Or when I'm creating, all I'm focused on is creating what I'm creating.
But different people are different. Like I say, some people find cleaning calms their mind because...
Well, then come to my house.
I'm like... But, because they start with something that's a mess. Like ironing. I like ironing because I can see what I've achieved at the end of it.
Yeah. It's not mentally taxing as such. Your body's going through the motions, but it's not,
Yeah. So you're doing something, you're focused on it,
Flow state.
Yeah. So, that's just something that calms your mind, which is different for everyone.
Yeah, that's going to be subjective for every single person. What number was that?
That was 4.
Okay. Number 5.
Don't be afraid to cancel plans if you're at your limit. It's okay to say, actually, I can't do that.
The power of no.
Yeah.
That's a superpower, isn't it?
It is, massively.
Sometimes we do feel very much like obligated. I mean, my friends will probably think I'm an arsehole for it, but I learned quite a few years ago that if it wasn't a hell yeah, it's probably a no. So it's got to be something really exciting if you want me to change plans or do something about it. So say that one again. What was it? What was it?
So don't be afraid to cancel plans if you're at your limit.
Yeah. Don't be afraid to cancel plans if you're at your limit.
But like you say, it's saying no to things, isn't it?
The power of no. It is a superpower. Don't feel obliged.
Yeah.
Okay, next one.
Listen to your body and your feelings and what that's telling you. Are you in pain? Are you tired? Are you feeling sad? What's going on? And then respond to that. Do something for you that if you've got backache, go on YouTube and put a yoga video on and see if you can stretch it out. If you're feeling sad, do something that makes you smile, or watch something that makes you smile, or talk to someone who makes you smile. It's just about being aware of.
But going back to what we said about sometimes how men don't understand those feelings. What if you don't understand? I mean, I know we've got 7 tips and this is not like this is the order you have to, but for those people, like you say, sometimes men don't understand those feelings that they are feeling. Is it pick another one off the list?
I guess if you struggle to understand your feelings, that's a sign that maybe you need to talk to someone, have some therapy and explore that in more depth with someone who kind of could help you understand them. But then noticing that you don't really understand what that feeling is a step forward, isn't it?
Very true.
Because you're noticing you're feeling something, but you don't understand what it is or why it's happening. Then that's something.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So,
number 7.
Talk to yourself like you would to your dog.
Oh, that's good. I mean, what's the old one I've heard before? Talk to yourself like you're your own best friend.
Yeah.
But talk to yourself like you're your dog.
Yeah.
I mean, apart from the baby voices and calling them ridiculous things. But
I mean, I know not everyone's dog people. But even when you are, I know this, when I'm saying to the dog, oh, aren't you silly? You're a bit stupid, aren't you? Like, it's never in a hurtful, angry, but I guess it's that, like, when you talk to yourself, you generally, and quite negative people can't.
So speak to yourself with the compassion that you would for a puppy or your best friend or whatever that thing is. Because like you say, not everyone's a dog person, but it might be.
Yeah, how you would talk to a child or,
Oh, it's amazing. Someone said, this is what I heard the other day. Right, in your brain, think of the 3 people you love the most. And I went, my mum, my dad, my sister. And they said, you didn't say you. And I went, oh, shit. But you don't. You don't think about yourself like that, do you? You don't. But treating yourself with some fucking compassion.
And that's my thing is, like, if you wouldn't say it to your dog or your best friend or your mom or you're like, why would you say it to yourself?
Oh, yeah, but we're horrible to ourselves sometimes.
And I do it, but then I remember, would I talk to my dog like that?
Yeah. Wow, that's 7 really good. And like you say, it's not a one-stop shop for fix all. If you are suffering with something, we suggest you get in touch with professionals. But like we've always said, you've got to give it, even if you don't think you're struggling with your mental health and you think you're fine, but you might look at your life and think, maybe I could do something. It's like, you've got to give yourself the fighting chance, haven't you? Sleep, exercise, good food, good people. That's the first point of call. If you're shoveling shit down your face, you're not going out, you're just watching rubbish the whole time or whatever, you're not giving yourself a fighting chance.
No.
So, they have 7 really good points that will definitely, I think, help people. As I say, at the beginning of this year, just to take a little bit of a look. It's something that you might implement one, you might implement none, but somewhere down the line, someone might find some of this stuff useful. And that's what we want to do, try and add value.
Yeah, and I think at the end of the day, that's 7 tips, isn't it? It's not, they're not going to suit everyone, but actually, if you've listened to this podcast, you've taken some time for yourself, great. And if none of those tips mean anything to you, fine, but you've listened to it and thought about yourself while thinking about whether those tips are any good for you. So
take what you need, leave the rest. If something's beneficial from this podcast, brilliant. If it's not, on to the next one.
Yeah.
Well, I think we've covered a lot there, but got some closing traditions. I like my guests to leave our listeners with an inspiring quote. I mean, you've given lots of inspiring stuff for people to take away. But
thank you.
An inspiring quote that maybe means something to you, but then also a future guest for the Creative Noahland podcast from your network. So take that as you will.
So my future guest is someone called Claire Hilton, and she is an art psychotherapist and artist, and I think she'd be really interesting.
An art psychotherapist and artist. Well, that fits the remit pretty well. Sure, she's got some valuable insights she can give us.
And the quote, and I can't remember who it's by.
We can have a Google afterwards.
Is, don't set yourself on fire to keep other people warm.
Oof, I like that. Don't set yourself on fire to keep other people warm. Oof, that's good. We're not going to analyse that one too much. That's bloody brilliant. In closing, not going to get all mushy, but I just want to say that I'm very proud of you.
Oh, thank you.
For all that you do, and seeing you help people in the way that you do every day is very inspiring. And in some ways, I think has helped inspire the podcast, because it's like, I've always believed that your talent plus helping people equals your purpose. And you talked earlier about how you found your purpose very early doors. And so, I'm not saying this is my talent, but if I can give people and add value to people, anything with this podcast, that's a purpose. So thank you for inspiring that, and thank you for doing the podcast.
You are welcome, and thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to the Creative Noahland podcast. If you found anything inspiring or useful in this episode, please consider subscribing or maybe sharing the episode with a friend. Anything you can do to help promote and support Creative Noahland is so beneficial, and I really appreciate it. Check out the website and sign up to the newsletter to be the first to know of everything that's going on here in Creative Noahland. Thanks again for listening, and until next time, explore, inspire, and create.
Better to have a short life that is full of what you like doing than a long life spent in a miserable way. And so, therefore, it's so important to consider this question: what do I desire?